The last sound I heard was not the screech of tires, but the softness in my husband's voice, a tone I had never heard in 40 years of marriage. "Clara," he whispered, his arms wrapped around Sarah, the woman he had always wanted. "I can finally throw away the disgusting cane I've used for 10 years. I can love you openly now." Then came the impact. My body, a thing of bones and memories, was tossed into the air like a discarded rag doll. The world became a blur of asphalt and screaming metal. Daniel, the man whose legs I had massaged back to life, whose body I had bathed and fed, had pushed me into the path of a speeding truck. 40 years of my life, erased in a single brutal shove. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was his face, not looking at my broken form, but gazing into Sarah's eyes with a reverence he had never ever bestowed upon me. I died with that image seared behind my eyelids, and then I opened my eyes. Sunlight, golden and young, streamed through the lace curtains of my girlhood room. The air smelled of my mother's rose bushes and fresh-baked bread. I sat bolt upright in my narrow bed, my hands flying to my face, my body. It was slim, strong, unburdened by decades of caregiving. This wasn't heaven. This was my past. "Elena. Come down, dear. Daniel is on his way," my mother's voice called from downstairs. A cold dread, sharper than any pain from the truck, pierced my heart. Daniel. The proposal. This was the day. I stumbled to the window, my legs strangely sturdy beneath me. Our small, tidy yard was just as I remembered. And then I saw him. Daniel Hayes, young and handsome in his crisp shirt, walking up the street. My breath hitched. But he wasn't carrying the small jewelry box I'd always imagined. He was carrying a large cardboard box. A television. Hope, foolish and fleeting, bloomed in my chest for a second. But it withered instantly. He didn't pause at our gate. He didn't even glance toward my window. He walked straight past our house and turned up the path to the grand house next door, the home of Sarah Wilkins, the factory director's daughter. The world tilted. He was reborn. He remembered everything. And his first act was to make a different choice. A better one for him. I heard my father's roar from downstairs. "That ungrateful little worm. He has a television. He's going to propose to that Wilkins girl." I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, listening to the sounds of my father's fury, the crashing of a chair being kicked. My mind was a whirlwind of 2 lifetimes, the crushing weight of the first and the terrifying blank slate of the second. "Elena." My father, Thomas, appeared at the foot of the stairs, his face purple with rage. His hair was thick and dark, not yet streaked with the gray that worry and disappointment would later paint. The sight of him so vibrantly alive brought hot, sudden tears to my eyes. "Don't you cry, my girl," he said, his voice softening as he saw my tears. He mistook them for heartbreak. "So what if he's a postal worker with a state job? I'll go over there right now and drag him back by his ear. That proposal belongs to you." He grabbed a thick bamboo pole from the umbrella stand, his intentions clear. In my first life I would have been right behind him, my heart soaring with the belief that he was fighting for my love. Now I saw the truth. He was fighting for my honor against a man who saw me as a stepping stone. "Dad, wait." He stopped, the pole held aloft. "What is it, Elena? Don't tell me you're defending him." I walked down the stairs slowly, each step solidifying my resolve. I reached out and placed a hand on his arm, the one holding the weapon meant to defend a love that never truly existed. "I'm not defending him," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm letting him go. If Daniel thinks Sarah's family background can help him more than ours, then he's not the man I thought he was. I won't fight for a man who trades love for ambition." My father stared at me, his anger replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. "Elena, are you feeling well? You've said since you were 16 that you would only ever marry Daniel Hayes." A wave of bitter laughter threatened to bubble up. Oh, the foolishness of youth. The blindness of a first love. "I was a child then," I said, lowering my gaze. "But I've grown up now. I want to choose someone better for myself." "Better? Who?" he asked, bewildered. I took a deep breath, the name feeling foreign yet right on my tongue. Didn't Marcus Thorne send a matchmaker to propose last week? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus Thorne. The name was synonymous with trouble. A wild youth with a sharp mind for business, he was already the talk of the town, our area's first real entrepreneur. In my first life I had thought him nothing but a flashy, unreliable rogue. I had chosen the stable, respectable Daniel over him. I had chosen a lifetime of servitude ending in betrayal over a chance at something real. My father's jaw hung open. Marcus Thorne? Elena, his reputation. People say he's reckless. He's not a steady man like Daniel was supposed to be. I gave him a small, sad smile. Dad, can a reputation feed you? Daniel had a good reputation and it didn't stop him from trampling all over me. Marcus may not have the best name, but he's successful. He has a future. And I've heard he's fiercely loyal to those he cares about. I paused, remembering snippets of gossip from my past life. Marcus Thorne, who built a massive business empire but was rumored to have never married, his heart always held by a woman he could never have. Tell the matchmaker I'm willing. My father searched my face for a long moment. He saw a determination there that he'd never seen before. He was a simple, honest man and he loved me more than anything. Seeing the steel in my eyes and comparing it to Daniel's very public betrayal, his resistance crumbled. He let out a long, heavy sigh, the bamboo pole clattering to the floor. As long as you're sure, my girl. As long as you won't regret this. I'll go find the Thorne family matchmaker. But if that Marcus Thorne ever dares to mistreat you, I'll make him regret the day he was born. He pulled me into a rough, heartfelt hug. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and pipe tobacco. Warmth flooded my chest, thawing the icy block of betrayal that had taken root there. This was my second chance. Not just to avoid a terrible fate but to build a good life. As my father stormed out, a new kind of energy filled me. Daniel Hayes could have his Sarah Wilkins. They could rot together for all I cared. They were part of a past life, a closed book. My future was with Marcus Thorne. The news spread through Oakwood Village like wildfire. The gossiping aunties who had been whispering about my humiliation now had a fresh, even more scandalous piece of meat to chew on. Did you hear? Elena Vance turned down Daniel Hayes and is marrying Marcus Thorne. Has she lost her mind? Daniel has a government job. What does Marcus have besides a fast car and a few shady deals? I bet Daniel found out she was seeing Marcus on the side. That's why he proposed to Sarah Wilkins. She's damaged goods, marrying the first man who'll still have her. The whispers were venomous, but they rolled off me like water off a duck's back. I had endured far worse in silence for 40 years. This was nothing. A few days later, while I was hanging laundry in the courtyard, the subject of the gossip himself appeared at our gate. Daniel Hayes stood there, his hands in his pockets, an infuriatingly smug look on his face, as if he still had some claim over me. Elena Vance, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Are you seriously going to marry that thug Marcus Thorne? I didn't even turn around. I continued pinning a sheet to the line. Wake up, Elena, he continued, stepping into the yard. What does Marcus Thorne have besides some dirty money? You think he can give you a real, respectable life? I finally turned to face him. Looking at his handsome, pretentious face, I felt nothing but a profound and utter disgust. This was the man for whom I had wasted a lifetime. Daniel Hayes, I said, my voice cold and flat. Who I marry is none of your damn business. His face contorted, flashing between anger and disbelief. He sputtered, choking on his own pride. I'm only saying this for your own good. I can't stand by and watch you throw yourself into a pit of fire. You won't be happy with someone like him. He took a step closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. I know you're still angry with me. But Sarah, she's the one I truly love. Her father is the director of the textile factory. He can open doors for me, give me a future you can't even imagine. You have to understand that. He leaned in, his voice becoming a conspiratorial whisper. If you regret this now, just say the word. Once I'm settled in the city with my new position, I'll make sure to look after you too. You can still have a place in my life. I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time in 2 lifetimes. He was ridiculous. He was pathetic. We had both come back from the dead, and he had the audacity to think I would willingly choose to be his side piece, his backup plan, his housemaid for another 40 years. I spoke with a calm that seemed to unnerve him. Daniel, there is nothing between us anymore. Who I marry and whether I am happy or not is none of your concern. Don't come bothering me again or I won't be so polite next time. He was shocked by my firmness. His eyes narrowed and the mask of concerned benevolence slipped, revealing the bitter, entitled man beneath. "Elena Vance," he sneered, "don't forget. Don't you ever forget who it was that saved you all those years ago." My heart stopped. The air left my lungs. So it was true. He remembered everything. The accident that crippled him, the one where he'd pushed me out of the way of a runaway cart. The foundational debt of my first life, the chain that bound me to him. He remembered it all. Before I could form a response, my father's voice thundered from the kitchen. "Who the hell is making a ruckus at my doorstep?" Suddenly, a basin of ice-cold, soapy water, the remains of yesterday's washing, came flying out of the kitchen window. It drenched Daniel from head to toe. He let out a shrill, undignified yelp, stumbling back, soaked and spluttering. My father stormed out, the empty basin in his hand, his face a thundercloud. "Oh, it's you," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at the dripping mess of a man. "You ungrateful little bastard. You think you're a swan now? Come here to gloat to my daughter? Take a look in the mirror, you piece of trash. Get lost. And if I ever see your face here again, I'll break your damn legs." Daniel's face went from red to sheet white. He was shaking with a mixture of cold and pure, humiliated rage. He pointed a finger at my dad, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no words came out. Finally, he stomped his foot, water sloshing from his shoes. "Just you wait," he growled through clenched teeth. Daniel Hayes, will make it big one day. You'll all regret this. You'll see." He turned and sloshed away, a pathetic figure leaving a trail of water and wounded pride. I watched him go, then looked at my dad standing there fierce and protective. A genuine laugh bubbled up from my chest, the first real laugh I'd had in what felt like a century. Dad chuckled too, his anger melting away as he saw my smile. "Sweetheart," he said, "as long as I'm around, no one is going to bully you." I nodded, my eyes misting over with tears of gratitude, not sorrow. The first battle was won. The war for my new life was just beginning. The gossip in Oakwood Village reached a fever pitch, but it was about to be utterly silenced. A few days after Daniel's humiliating exit, Marcus Thorne arrived to formally propose, and he did so in a way that shook the entire village to its core. The rumble of engines announced his arrival long before the procession came into view. 4 young men, crisp in clean white shirts, rode brand-new flying pigeon bicycles. They formed a guard of honor for the man himself. Marcus wasn't on a bike. He was driving a deep blue, slightly battered but impeccably clean sedan. A vehicle so rare in our village it might as well have been a spaceship. The entire neighborhood spilled out of their homes, crowding around our courtyard fence, their eyes wide and mouths agape. The 2 lead bicyclists carried a large, red-lacquered wedding trunk between them, its polished surface gleaming in the sun. It was said to be filled with clothes and fine fabrics for every season. The other 2 brought up the rear, their handlebars laden with baskets containing cigarettes, expensive wine, fine sugar, tea, and 2 plump, red-feathered roosters, their feet tied but their heads held high as if they knew they were part of a spectacle. And then there was Marcus. He stepped out of the car and a hush fell over the crowd. He wore a well-tailored Zhongshan suit, the kind officials wore, but on him it looked different. Less bureaucratic, more powerful. He had a confident, almost roguish charm, but as his eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me, standing in the doorway, all that swagger melted away into something else. A nervous, intense seriousness. The same aunties who had been whispering that I was damaged goods, just days before now stretched their necks, their eyes wide with envy. My father, Thomas, stood beside me, and I heard his sharp intake of breath as the gifts were carried into our courtyard, covering the swept earth ground with a display of wealth we'd only ever heard about in stories. The gloom that had hung over him since Daniel's betrayal vanished, replaced by a stunned, proud glow. And then, as if on cue, a small commotion stirred at the edge of the crowd. Daniel Hayes and Sarah Wilkins had just happened to be passing by. Sarah was dressed in a trendy floral dress, her hair styled in big, fashionable waves. She clung possessively to Daniel's arm. Daniel, in a slightly worn white shirt, tried to project the air of a man on the rise. Sarah's eyes swept over the gifts in our courtyard, over Marcus's car, and a sneer twisted her pretty face. She muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is it? And they call this impressive?" Then she raised her voice, a false, tinkling sound. "Just the other day, Daniel bought me a black and white television that cost over $100. Once we get our place in the city, we'll be watching TV every day." She exaggerated the words, our place in the city, preening under the attention. Daniel stood beside her with a smug, satisfied look, as if waiting for me to crumble, to show a flicker of regret. My father's face darkened instantly. Marcus, who had been watching the exchange with a detached amusement, saw the shift in my father's mood. The easy smirk on his face disappeared, replaced by a quiet authority. He took a step forward, placing himself between our family and the interlopers. Mr. Hayes, Miss Wilkins, he said, his voice calm but carrying clearly. Today is the day I'm formally proposing to Elena. I appreciate your passing interest. His tone made it clear their presence was as insignificant as that of flies. Then he turned his back on them completely, a deliberate dismissal that was more powerful than any shout. He took a small box wrapped in red paper from one of his men and held it carefully with both hands as he presented it to my father. Sir, he said, his voice sincere, this is a token of my sincerity. My father, looking bewildered, took the box and opened it. His gasp was audible. Inside, neatly stacked, was a thick wad of banknotes. Holy hell, he muttered, his hands trembling. 2,000 bucks? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. 2,000 yuan. A regular worker's monthly wage was 30 or 40 yuan. This was an astronomical sum, a king's ransom. My father was stunned into silence. Marcus, this is way too much. I can't accept this. The Vance girl really struck gold this time. She's going to be a rich lady. What's a government housing unit compared to this? Elena is truly blessed. The villagers' whispers were now filled with awe, the earlier scorn completely forgotten. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned to me, his gaze locking with mine. His eyes were gentle but held a resolute fire. Elena, he said, and the courtyard fell silent again, everyone straining to hear. I know my reputation hasn't been great. And I know I must have caused you and your father some worry. He paused, taking a deep breath as if steeling himself for the most important deal of his life. This, he gestured to the money, is everything I've saved over the years through my business. But that's just money. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out an oil paper-wrapped envelope. He unfolded it carefully, revealing an official-looking document stamped with a bright red seal. And I've also brought the deed to a small house in the city. I brought the original document with me. The crowd erupted. A house. He was offering a house in the city. I saw Daniel's face. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, fixed on the red-sealed deed. Disbelief warred with a furious, bitter jealousy. This wasn't in his script. In his reborn mind, I was supposed to be pining for him, living a life of quiet desperation in his shadow, forever regretting my loss. He was the protagonist. I was the discarded side character. My marrying someone far more successful than he could ever hope to be, and gaining with such ease everything he coveted, was a fundamental violation of the order of his universe. Elena Vance, he spat out, his voice strangled. How could you? I met his gaze, my own cold and steady. Daniel Hayes, who I choose to marry, is none of your business. The neighbors, emboldened by the spectacle and the shift in power, didn't hold back. Daniel, don't tell me you're jealous just because Elena found herself a good man. Weren't you the one who dumped her for the factory director's daughter? It's too late for regrets now. Honestly, the more I look at Marcus Thorne, the more I like him. What a fine young man. Daniel and Sarah's expressions were a sight to behold. I saw a flash of pure, venomous jealousy in Sarah's eyes before she dug her nails sharply into Daniel's arm. But he didn't even flinch. He just stood there, his face shifting from red to pale to a sickly gray, utterly defeated by the display. And then, in the midst of this, Marcus Thorne did the unthinkable. He turned to me, and in front of God and everyone, he dropped to one knee. The courtyard fell so silent you could hear the chickens clucking in the distance. I, Marcus Thorne, he said, his voice ringing out strong and clear, swear before all the elders and villagers today. As long as Elena agrees to marry me, every cent I earn from this day forward will be given to her to manage. I'll love her with all I have for the rest of my life and never take another woman. My breath caught in my throat. In my last life I had saved and sacrificed for Daniel for decades, only to be cast aside like garbage. Now here was a man on his knees willing to hand over his entire world, his entire future, just for me to say yes. The contrast was so stark it was dizzying. I looked at this man with his street-smart confidence and his unexpectedly tender heart. I saw the nervous hope in his eyes, the genuine commitment in his vow. How could I possibly say no? I took a deep breath, my heart swelling with a feeling I hadn't known in a lifetime, pure, unadulterated hope. I met his gaze and let a soft, genuine smile touch my lips. "I do," I said. The tension shattered. A joyous roar went up from the crowd. Marcus's face broke into a brilliant, uncontainable smile of pure relief and elation. He almost leapt to his feet, looking like he wanted to sweep me into his arms then and there. As the crowd buzzed and cheered, Daniel and Sarah slunk away, their grand entrance completely forgotten, their arrogance deflated. When Sarah left, she shot me a look of such venomous hatred it could have curdled milk. But I didn't care. Let her hate me. Let them both rot in their bitterness. My new life had officially begun. The weeks following the proposal were a whirlwind. The disdainful whispers in Oakwood Village had transformed into envious chatter. I was no longer poor Elena jilted by Daniel Hayes, but Elena Vance, the future Mrs. Thorne. The power of perception, I was learning, was often just as potent as reality. Marcus was true to his word. He involved me in everything, treating our impending marriage as a partnership from the very start. He brought ledgers to our kitchen table, his large, capable hands tracing columns of numbers as he explained his various ventures. Small-scale transport, buying and selling surplus goods from the city, a few tentative deals with traders from the coast. His mind was sharp, intuitive, and unafraid of risk, but I saw the gaps. He was brilliant at seizing opportunities but less focused on long-term stability. "See this," he said one afternoon, pointing to a figure. "Bought 50 cartons of foreign cigarettes from a port contact. Sold them in the city for triple in 2 days. Easy money." "It is," I agreed, pouring him more tea. "But it's unpredictable. What happens when your port contact dries up? Or when the city cracks down on unlicensed tobacco sales?" He looked at me not with annoyance but with genuine curiosity. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we use that easy money to build something harder but more permanent." I leaned forward. "The whole country is changing, Marcus. There's talk of reform and opening up, even in the newspaper my father reads. The future isn't in quick, gray market deals. It's in real trade. Connecting what's made here with what's needed there officially." He stared at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. "You sound like one of those economists from the capital. But smarter." He tapped the ledger. "Go on." It was then I knew I had made the right choice. Daniel had never listened to my ideas, he'd only ever expected my support. Marcus was listening as if I held a map to a hidden treasure. Our wedding was a spectacle that would be talked about in Oakwood Village for a generation. Marcus didn't just hold a banquet, he staged an event. He rented the entire open-air pavilion at the Friendship Hotel, the most prestigious venue in the county seat. He hired 2 Liberation brand trucks to ferry every single villager who wanted to attend from Oakwood to the city and back, turning the journey into a roaring, joyful procession. On the day I wore a dress of vibrant red silk, tailored and modern, not the traditional stiff jacket so many brides still wore. Marcus stood beside me at the entrance to the pavilion, greeting our guests, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. He wore a Western-style suit, and he looked so handsome and sure of himself that my heart ached with a fragile happiness. His eyes, whenever they met mine, overflowed with a kind of bewildered, grateful love that made me feel seen in a way I never had before. We had 20 tables laden with food, whole steamed fish, braised pork belly, platters of dumplings, and fruits I was sure most of the villagers had never seen before. My father, Thomas, moved through the crowd, his face split by a permanent, proud grin. The humiliation Daniel had inflicted was washed away in a tide of roast duck and fine liquor. And then, as if summoned by the very force of my contentment, he appeared. Daniel Hayes stood at the edge of the pavilion, his hair slicked back with too much pomade, his best shirt neatly pressed. He waited until Marcus was pulled away by a group of well-wishing businessmen, then he slithered through the crowd to my side. "Elena," he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "This is your last chance. If you leave with me right now, I'll pretend none of this ever happened." I stared at him, truly stunned by the sheer, unadulterated arrogance. He looked at me with burning, intense eyes, fully believing that I was just playing a part, that in my heart of hearts, I was still his, waiting for him to rescue me from my gilded cage. A laugh, sharp and utterly without mirth, escaped my lips. He flinched. Before I could even form a cutting reply, a warm, solid presence was at my side. Marcus had seen him. He didn't look angry, he looked amused. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, a gesture of pure, unshakable solidarity. "Mr. Hayes," Marcus said, his voice playful but with a core of steel. "Today's my wedding day. Are you here to cause a scene?" He didn't raise his voice, but it carried, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "My wife has excellent taste. No way she'd be interested in someone like you." Daniel's face flushed a deep, angry red. His whole body trembled with rage. "You, Daniel." The shrill voice cut through the festivities. Emily Parker stood at the pavilion entrance, her face a mask of fury. She was dressed in a new outfit, clearly bought to compete, but she looked cheap and desperate next to the simple elegance of the event. "I've been looking for you all morning," she screeched, storming over. "You said you were out delivering mail. And here you are at her wedding. Do you regret proposing to me now?" Her voice cracked, on the verge of theatrical tears. All eyes were on them now, a free, embarrassing sideshow to our main event. The stares seemed to physically press down on them. "Elena Vance, just you wait," Daniel snarled at me, his voice low and venomous. Then he grabbed Emily's arm and practically dragged her out of the pavilion, a storm of humiliation and mutual loathing. Marcus turned to me, his playful grin back in place. "Well, that was entertaining. Don't let trash like that ruin your mood, my beautiful wife." He leaned in, whispering with a boyish smugness. "So how'd I do? Wasn't I cool?" Looking at his proud, goofy face, all the tension melted away. I squeezed his hand. "You were perfect." After the wedding, we settled into the small city house whose deed he had presented to my father. It was simple but clean, with running water and its own private courtyard. It was a palace compared to the cramped, communal living of the village. Our life together was peaceful, sweet, and filled with a growing mutual respect. True to his vow, Marcus handed over his earnings every week. He didn't just give me money, he gave me control. He trusted my judgment implicitly. Meanwhile, Daniel was making good on his public promise to make it big. Using the knowledge he'd brought back, he leveraged his position as a mail carrier to start a side business. He began trafficking in pirated cassette tapes, smuggled in from coastal ports. The music was a novelty, a craving for the youth, and he had a near monopoly. Soon he made his first real pile of cash. He bought Emily new flashy clothes and splurged on a brand new Japanese motorcycle. Every day they would roar through Oakwood Village, Emily clinging to his back, her laughter loud and ostentatious. They were the new it couple, and Emily never missed a chance to preen. "Did you see my new watch?" she'd ask the village women, loud enough for me to hear if I was visiting my father. "Daniel says only the best for me. It's a shame some people have to marry for money because they were thrown away." Sometimes, Daniel would gun the motorcycle's engine as he passed our city house, shouting about a new deal or a fancy purchase. "Elena, you see this? This is what a real life looks like. You could have had all this." I never responded. I would just watch from the window, a quiet smile on my face. His childish bragging was a mask for a deep, gnawing insecurity. He was riding high, but his business was built on sand, unregulated, unstable, and entirely dependent on the lax enforcement of the moment. I knew a storm was coming. The real opportunities, the lasting ones, were still ahead of us, waiting to be built. Using the fragmented memories of policy shifts from my past life and a growing understanding of the economic currents, I began to guide our investments. We took the profits from Marcus's smaller ventures and, with the contacts he'd made, quietly began moving into foreign trade. Marcus trusted me completely. "You have a nose for this, Elena," he'd say, amazed as another of my suggestions paid off. We made several trips south to the special economic zones in Shenzhen and Guangzhou. The air there crackled with a frenetic energy, a hunger for the new. We met with Hong Kong traders, their suits sharper, their calculators never far from hand. We used the information and price gaps between the mainland and Hong Kong to our advantage. Our first major deal was securing a large order of affordable synthetic fabrics for a local street committee. Fabrics that were cheaper and more stylish than the local Dacron. The profit was staggering, far surpassing anything Daniel was making with his tapes. But we kept a low profile. To the outside world, Marcus Thorne was still the same lucky scoundrel, and I was the wife who had married into a stagnant fortune. Let Daniel and Emily have their spotlight. We were building our foundation in the shadows, brick by solid brick, waiting for the moment their house of cards would fall. The city's first official trade fair was the event of the season. It was a signal, a grand opening of doors that had been sealed for decades. For Marcus and me, it was our coming out party. For Daniel, it would be the beginning of his end. We were invited as official representatives of the city's emerging private trade sector. Our booth was large, in a prime location near the entrance, professionally curated with samples of our most successful imports. Sleek, precision-engineered wristwatches under glass counters, and bolts of the elegant, affordable synthetic fabric that was becoming our signature product. The day was a whirlwind of handshakes and negotiations. Mr. Chin, the head organizer, had greeted us with deep respect, his demeanor making it clear to all that we were guests of honor. Marcus, in his element, charmed officials and buyers alike, while I handled the details of orders and contracts, my calm efficiency a perfect counterpoint to his gregarious energy. We were in the middle of discussing a large order with the department store manager when I heard a familiar, condescending voice. Well, if it isn't Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. Daniel Hayes stood at the edge of our booth, Emily on his arm. He was dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, trying to project an image of success, but he just looked like a boy playing dress-up. His eyes swept over our display, a flicker of pure, unvarnished jealousy quickly masked by arrogance. Came to check out the trade fair, huh? He said, his voice loud. I guess you two wanted to see what real business looks like. This place isn't for regular folks like you. It's for big players. He puffed out his chest. Hope you brought enough money. Nothing here's cheap. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was a clear, genuine sound that made his face tighten. Marcus just smiled, a slow, predatory grin. We managed to scrape a few things together, Hayes. Don't you worry about us. It was then that Daniel noticed the official placard on our booth, the one with our company name and the words "Invited Guest" stamped in red. His confidence faltered for a second. Before he could process it, Marcus and I excused ourselves from the department store manager and moved to speak with another client. As we turned, Daniel suddenly darted in front of me, blocking my path. He grabbed a cassette tape from the small box he was carrying, his own sad makeshift inventory for his paltry booth somewhere in the far corners of the hall. Elena, he said, his voice low and intense, trying to shove the tape into my hands. I've said it before. Only I, Daniel Hayes, can give you the kind of life people envy. Take it. This is top-quality stuff, fresh from Hong Kong. I recoiled, slapping his hand away. The tape flew from his grip and clattered to the concrete floor, the plastic casing cracking. Daniel Hayes, I said, my voice cold and steady. Are you still dreaming? His face contorted in rage. Elena Vance, you're unbelievable. Do you even know how much that tape costs? He yelled, drawing stares from nearby attendees. Pay for it. Now. Just then Mr. Chin, hearing the commotion, hurried over. Daniel's eyes lit up with vindictive triumph. He stepped into the man's path, putting on a pitiful expression. Sir, these two intentionally broke my merchandise. They're causing trouble at the fair. We paid good money to be here. You have to make them compensate me. At least 100, no, 1,000 yuan. Mr. Chin's brow furrowed in annoyance. He completely ignored Daniel, brushing past him as if he were a piece of furniture. He walked up to Marcus and me, his stern face instantly softening into a respectful smile. There you are, he said warmly, reaching out to shake Marcus's hand. We've been expecting you. Must have been a long trip back from your last sourcing trip to Hong Kong. I smiled politely. Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Chin. It's an honor to be part of this. Mr. Chin laughed heartily. You're being modest. You and Mr. Thorne are well-known representatives of the city's rising private trade scene. Your success is admired by all. He glanced dismissively at the broken tape on the floor. Please don't let any minor disruptions bother you. Your special booth has been ready. Shall we? At that, Daniel's jaw dropped. I could almost hear the crack. The crowd that had gathered was now staring at us with newfound respect, and at Daniel with open ridicule. As we walked with Mr. Chin toward our main booth, a curious crowd, including a stunned Daniel and Emily, trailed behind us. When they saw our main display, the gleaming watches, the vibrant fabrics, All officially imported and sanctioned. Their jealousy was palpable. This can't be real, Daniel muttered, his eyes wide. Emily was practically vibrating with envy, her gaze locked on the elegant watch on my wrist. For a moment I thought she might lunge and try to rip it off. Under the crowd's watchful eyes, Marcus and I confidently conducted our business. Praise and purchase orders flowed. Our booth became the epicenter of the fair, a hub of legitimate, prosperous commerce. In stark contrast, Daniel and Emily's tiny stall with its pile of pirated tapes looked pathetic and shabby. Later, when Marcus was pulled away by some city officials, Daniel approached me again, his expression a storm of suspicion and fury. "Elena Vance," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. "Tell me the truth. Where did you get all this? Did you remember something too?" I kept my face a calm mask. "What are you talking about, Daniel? I don't understand." His teeth were gritted. "Don't play dumb with me. I know you've been reborn. If I hadn't saved you back then, you'd be dead. And now that you've climbed up the ladder by hooking up with Marcus Thorne, you think you can just cast me aside." He leaned in, his breath hot on my face. "That trade business of yours? I want half. Oh. Hand over the whole thing or I'll expose you. I'll tell everyone what you are. That you're a freak who came back from the dead." I looked at his greedy, twisted face, the face of the man who had murdered me, and felt nothing but cold, clean disgust. "Daniel Hayes," I said calmly. "You're sick and there's no cure for you." I turned to leave. Enraged, he raised his hand as if to strike me. But before the blow could fall, a hand like a steel vice clamped around his wrist. Marcus had returned. His face was dark with a thunderous rage I had never seen before. "What," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you think you're doing?" Daniel winced in pain, his bravado vanishing. "Let go of me, Thorne. This is between me and Elena." "Elena is my wife," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "Anything that concerns her concerns me." He flung Daniel's arm away with such force that Daniel stumbled back. Marcus then turned to me, his expression instantly softening as he placed a protective hand on my shoulder. "Come on, Elena. Let's go. He's not worth our time." I nodded. We walked away together, leaving Daniel standing alone, his body trembling with a rage so complete it seemed to consume him. He didn't notice Emily watching from a distance, her eyes fixed not on him, but on the way Marcus's hand rested on the small of my back, a look of complicated, bitter envy on her face. The battle at the trade fair was over. We had won, publicly and decisively. But I knew Daniel wasn't finished. His pride was in tatters, and a man with nothing left to lose is a dangerous creature. The real war was just beginning. The success of the trade fair solidified our reputation. Marcus Thorne was no longer just a wealthy ne'er-do-well. He was a respected entrepreneur, a visionary. And I was his secret weapon, the quiet, sharp-minded wife whose intuition for business was uncanny. We moved from our small city house into a spacious two-story home with a garden in the best part of the county town. Through our Hong Kong connections, we even imported a nearly new Toyota sedan, a deep green marvel that turned heads wherever we went. News of our new home and car swept through Oakwood Village, eclipsing all of Daniel's previous boasts. The narrative had irrevocably shifted. That Thorne boy hit the jackpot marrying Elena. She's a lucky charm. Did you see the car? I heard it cost more than a house. Remember when we thought she was settling? Turns out she was playing chess while Daniel was playing checkers. When Daniel heard the news, he was reportedly speechless for a full day. Marcus Thorne, that useless troublemaker. Where did he get that kind of money? He was said to have ranted. Meanwhile, he was struggling to scrape together enough to buy Emily a decent wristwatch, a poor imitation of the one I wore. Watching me live a life far beyond his reach, a life he once believed I could never achieve without him, shattered the last vestiges of his superiority. He began to suffer from insomnia. At night, haunted by the memories he'd tried to bury, the ghost of our first life would creep in. He remembered the days after the accident when he was crippled and helpless. He remembered me staying by his side day and night, feeding him, washing him, pushing his wheelchair into the feeble sun. He remembered how, at our lowest, I'd racked my brain to come up with small business ideas. Mending clothes, selling homemade pickles, just to keep us from starving. A corrosive regret began to eat at him. He wondered, If I hadn't been blinded by Emily's family background, if I had truly cherished Elena, would I now be the one living in that two-story house, driving that car? As he wrestled with these demons, Emily came to him, her eyes bright with avarice. Daniel, I saw a new watch at the department store. It looks just like the one Elena wore at the trade fair. Buy it for me. He bit back his frustration. How much? 2,000. 2,000 yuan, he exploded, the pressure finally boiling over. What kind of damn watch costs that much? He couldn't afford it. The irritation and remorse he'd been suppressing erupted. Why are you always comparing yourself to Elena? He's smart. He helps her husband build a business. And you? All you do is spend and nag. He lashed out, calling her vain, greedy, and completely indifferent to his struggles. But Emily wasn't one to be silenced. She broke down in loud, dramatic sobs. And what about you? Why don't you look at how Marcus treats Elena? He buys her gold rings and designer purses. You're just a worthless, broke loser. I should never have married you in the first place. The fight ended with Emily being sent back to her parents' house in a fury. Daniel, left alone in the silence, felt a perverse sense of relief. But it was short-lived. For the iron fist of the city was finally coming down. A massive enforcement campaign, stricter and more sweeping than anyone had anticipated, was launched across the region. The authorities were cracking down hard on speculative trading and unlicensed business activity. The gray market was being painted black. Panic spread like wildfire. Those who had made money skirting the rules sensed real danger and froze their operations, choosing to wait out the storm. But not Daniel. Stubborn, arrogant, and blinded by his reborn foresight. He believed this was just a temporary bluff, no different from previous, smaller crackdowns. He mocked those who retreated as cowards. The bold get rich, the timid starve, he scoffed to anyone who would listen. You people will never make it big with your fear. But I saw the scattered signals for what they were. A fundamental shift. I immediately went to Marcus. We need to offload anything that falls into a regulatory gray zone. No. And we need to redirect our profits from foreign trade into more stable, tangible assets. As always, he trusted me without question. Whatever you say, boss. He grinned. We moved with a speed that baffled our competitors. We sold off remaining stock of certain electronics and non-essential imported goods at low prices. Yes, we took a loss, but we avoided a catastrophe. Then we used the liquidated capital to fully pay for our new house and car. We were battening down the hatches. News about Daniel came quickly. Because his tape reselling operation had expanded too recklessly and his supply chains were blatantly unregulated, he became a prime target. Almost overnight, the authorities raided his warehouse. All his stockpiled goods were seized and confiscated. Every penny he had invested evaporated. His entire cash flow collapsed. He didn't just lose everything, he fell deep into debt. The business partners who once called him Brother Hayes now avoided him like the plague. And then came the final blow. Emily. When she found out he was not just broke but in debt, she didn't offer comfort or support. She didn't even show her face. She quietly emptied the last of his remaining cash and the few pieces of cheap jewelry he'd bought her, then disappeared without a trace. She left him only a scrap of paper, a cold echo of his own faithlessness. Take care of yourself. Don't come looking for me again. Daniel was left completely alone, stunned and ruined. He had spent this entire second life scheming and calculating. How had it all ended in this? Betrayed by the woman he'd chosen, bankrupt and drowning in debt. He couldn't understand why, even with knowledge of the future, he had failed so spectacularly. He wandered the city streets in a daze, a hollowed-out shell of the arrogant man he had been. It was in this state that our paths crossed one final decisive time. Our brand-new Toyota sedan rolled to a smooth stop at a curb near the city center. Marcus, glowing with health and confidence, stepped out from the driver's side. He walked around the car with a gentleman's flair and opened the passenger door for me, offering his hand. I took it, stepping out onto the pavement, saying something to him that made us both laugh. The sight of us, happy, successful, and utterly together, pierced Daniel like a physical blow. He instinctively tried to shrink into the shadows, but it was too late. We had seen him. Marcus saw him too. His arm tightened protectively around my waist. Daniel opened his mouth, trying to form words. A greeting, a plea, a curse. But no sound emerged. He looked at me vibrant and loved. He looked at Marcus handsome and successful. Then he looked down at his own broken, defeated self, his clothes rumpled, his face gaunt. A wave of shame and regret so powerful it was almost tangible washed over him. In the end he could say nothing. He could only watch, a forgotten spectator, as Marcus guided me into an upscale restaurant, the door closing behind us, shutting him out of our world forever. Only then did he finally understand what he had truly lost. He'd been given a second chance at life and had destroyed it with his own hands. The woman he had abandoned had become the very embodiment of the success and happiness he had craved. That night, Daniel drank himself into oblivion at a filthy roadside bar. Alone he cursed the heavens for being unfair, cursed Emily for being heartless, and cursed himself for being blind and foolish. He collapsed drunk and insensate onto the dark street. And in the deep of night a freight truck, its driver's visibility limited, failed to see the crumpled form at the road's edge. It rolled directly over his legs. The sound of snapping bone was lost in the rumble of the engine. Fate, in its cruel, perfect irony, had come full circle. In our previous life he lost his legs saving me. In this one he lost them through his own selfishness and folly, utterly and completely alone. His second life was swallowed by the same darkness as his first. The news reached Oakwood Village by midday. Daniel Hayes, the once promising postal worker, had been in a terrible accident. He was alive but his legs were crushed. He was crippled, penniless and drowning in debt. The village that had once buzzed with his boasts now murmured with a kind of grim pity. The power couple was now a tragic punchline. I felt a strange emptiness when my father told me. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was the quiet closing of a long, painful chapter. The karmic balance had been restored with an almost mathematical precision. Meanwhile, the foreign trade business Marcus and I had built grew stronger and more resilient. We had navigated the policy crackdown unscathed, our reputation for clean dealing and quality goods earning us more official contracts. Marcus completely shed his old reputation. He was now Mr. Thorne, a brilliant young businessman known for his sharp mind and, just as famously, his devotion to his wife. The legend of our partnership spread. Without Elena I'd be nothing, he'd tell anyone who asked, his hand finding mine, his eyes sincere. And he meant it. We were happy. Truly deeply happy. The kind of happiness that isn't loud or boastful, but quiet and steady, built on a foundation of mutual trust and shared purpose. And then a new joy bloomed in our lives. I discovered I was pregnant. The news filled our new home with a light so brilliant it felt like we could live on it alone. Marcus was ecstatic, treating me as if I were made of glass and gold, his love now tinged with a wondrous, protective awe. One drizzly afternoon, we drove the Toyota out to inspect a garment factory we had recently invested in, a logical expansion of our fabric trade. The factory was on the outskirts of the county town, a sprawling, noisy complex of brick and corrugated metal. As soon as the car stopped in front of the main gate, a familiar hunched figure caught my attention. Daniel. He was hobbling out of the factory gate on a pair of worn wooden crutches, his body soaked from the rain, struggling with every step. He looked decades older. His face was sallow and drawn from long-term malnutrition and hardship, his eyes dulled by a hopelessness that was painful to behold. He was clearly doing some menial, low-paying odd job within. When he saw us, he froze. A storm of emotions flickered across his ravaged face: shame, regret, and a deep, cringing humility. He hesitated, watching as Marcus came around to open my car door. Then, gathering some desperate final shred of courage, he hobbled toward us, dragging one leg, the crutches scraping painfully on the wet asphalt. He blocked my path just as I was about to step out. Elena. His voice was a hoarse, dry rasp, tinged with a desperation that was utterly foreign coming from him. He couldn't meet my eyes. I know I was wrong, he choked out. I shouldn't have treated you that way. He lowered his head further, rainwater dripping from his matted hair. Emily, she lied to me. She used me. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a pleading, sorrowful hope that was somehow more pathetic than his anger had ever been. Is there any chance we could go back? Back to the way things were? He took a ragged breath, playing his final, most pathetic card. I became disabled, because I was trying to save you. Remember? He was trying to summon sympathy, to tug on the last thread that connected us from our past life, the one he thought would bind me to him forever. I looked at him calmly. I looked at the face that had once been the sun of my universe, now just a roadmap of misery. But inside I felt nothing. No hatred, no anger, not even a ripple of pity. Just a distant, profound sense of closure. The debt was paid. The ledger was balanced. Before I could even speak, Marcus was there. He didn't push Daniel, didn't shout. He simply stepped forward and positioned himself between us, his broad back shielding me completely, a wall of quiet, unassailable finality. "Daniel Hayes," Marcus said, his voice not loud, but carrying a calm, indisputable authority that brooked no argument. "My wife is pregnant. She's very happy now. She doesn't need anyone disturbing her peace." He paused, letting the words sink in, each one a nail in the coffin of Daniel's hopes. "Whatever happened in the past, good or bad, it's already over. You made your choice. You live with it." Then he turned his back on Daniel completely, his entire focus on me. His expression softened into a tender smile as he wrapped a strong arm around my shoulders. "Come on, Elena. It's raining. Let's not catch a cold." I nodded, leaning into his warmth and strength. I let him guide me through the factory gates, away from the wreckage of the past. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what was there. Behind us, Daniel stood alone in the relentless drizzle, watching us walk away together. His back, once so proud and straight, slowly slumped forward until he was barely upright on his crutches. The rain streamed down his face, mingling with his tears, washing away the last of his pride, his hope, his very identity. And in that moment he finally understood the ultimate unforgiving truth. Some people, once you lose them, are gone for good. And what he had lost through his own greed and arrogance was not just a woman, but his entire chance at redemption, at love, at a life worth living. He was left with nothing but the cold rain and the echo of his own regrets. The finality of that encounter in the rain settled over me like a deep, lasting peace. The ghost that had haunted my second chance had been laid to rest, not with vengeance, but with the simple, profound act of living well. The space in my heart that had been reserved for old pain was now filled to overflowing with the present. My pregnancy became the center of our universe. Marcus transformed from a confident businessman into a comically anxious soon-to-be father. He fretted over my diet, my rest, the temperature of the house. He would talk to my growing belly, his voice a low, earnest rumble, telling our child stories of his business deals, promising them a world full of love and opportunity. The sight of this strong, capable man brought to his knees by the miracle of a tiny, kicking foot was enough to make my heart ache with a joy so sharp it was almost painful. "He's going to be a girl," Marcus declared one evening, his hand resting on the swell of my stomach as we sat in our garden. "She's going to be as clever and beautiful as her mother." "Or he's going to be a boy," I countered, smiling, "with his father's charm and his mother's good sense." "As long as they're healthy," he said, his voice suddenly soft and serious. "As long as you are both safe, Elena. That's all that matters in this world." Our business, now firmly established as Thorn Imports, continued to thrive. The stability we had fought for paid dividends. We were no longer just traders. We were employers, partners, a respected local institution. My role evolved from behind-the-scenes strategist to an equal partner in the public eye. I attended meetings, negotiated contracts, and my opinion was sought on everything from logistics to marketing. The Lucky Charm narrative had faded, replaced by a genuine respect for my acumen. We used our success to lift up those around us. My father, Thomas, retired from his back-breaking farm work and moved into a small, comfortable cottage on our property. The pride in his eyes every time he looked at me, at our home, at my thriving husband, was my greatest reward. He would spend his days tending a small vegetable patch and doting on me, his constant refrain being, "I always knew you were destined for great things, my girl. I just didn't know how great." The news of Daniel's fate became a distant, sad footnote. He had been forced to leave the county town, too deep in debt and too humiliated to stay. Rumor had it he'd moved to a remote village to live with a distant, reluctant relative, surviving on meager government disability and the charity of others. The man who had dreamed of soaring higher than anyone else had been grounded, permanently and utterly. There were no more thoughts of him, no more energy wasted. He was simply gone. The day our daughter was born was the day the sun truly felt like it was shining for us alone. We named her and meaning, peace. Little and had Marcus's dark, expressive eyes and a tuft of my fair hair. The moment the midwife placed her in my arms, a tiny warm weight against my chest, the last lingering shadows of my first life dissolved. This was the true purpose of my rebirth. Not for revenge but for this. For this perfect, new beginning swaddled in soft cotton. Marcus wept unashamedly when he held her for the first time, his large, calloused hands impossibly gentle. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Your papa is here. I'm going to give you the whole world." Watching him with our daughter was a revelation. He was a natural father, patient, playful, and utterly devoted. The man who had once been known for his wild streak now found his greatest joy in rocking his baby to sleep or making silly faces to hear her gurgle with laughter. The love I felt for him deepened into something unshakable, a bedrock certainty that this was the man I was always meant to build a life with. As I grew from a baby into a bright, curious toddler, our lives settled into a rhythm of deep contentment. Our business expanded, but we prioritized our family. There were no more frantic, extended trips south. We built a team we could trust, delegating authority and ensuring our time was spent where it mattered most. At home. One summer afternoon, we hosted a picnic in our garden. Our friends and business associates were there, their children running and playing on the lawn. My father sat in a comfortable chair, bouncing a giggling in on his knee. The air was filled with the smell of grilled meat and the sound of easy laughter. I stood with Marcus at the edge of the lawn, his arm around my waist, watching the scene. Our daughter, our home, our happiness, it was all so tangible, so real. "You know," Marcus said quietly, his lips close to my ear. "When that matchmaker first came to me and said the most beautiful, intelligent girl in Oakwood Village was willing to marry me, I thought it was a trick. I thought your father was setting me up for a beating." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "And now?" He turned me slightly to face him, his eyes serious. "Now I know I'm the luckiest man who ever lived. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, Elena. You didn't just marry me, you built me. You built this." He gestured to everything around us. "This life, it's all because of you." Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were tears of pure joy. "We built it together, Marcus. You gave me your trust. That was the foundation for everything." In that moment, surrounded by the love and life we had created, the past felt not like a separate life, but like a faded, painful dream. The decades of servitude, the betrayal, the coldness under the wheels of the truck, they had no power here. They were the fertilizer from which this beautiful, peaceful present had grown. This was my victory. Not Daniel's downfall, but this. A husband who looked at me as his equal, his partner, his everything. A daughter who would never know a day without being cherished. A father who could live out his years in comfort and pride. A legacy not of bitterness but of sunlight. I had been given a second chance, and I had not simply avoided a bad fate. I had crafted a wonderful one. I had taken the shattered pieces of one life and, with patience and love, built a mosaic far more beautiful than the original painting could ever have been. Years have a way of flowing like a river, swift and steady. The vibrant young mother I was slowly matured into a woman of substance, the co-architect of a small commercial empire and the matriarch of a thriving family. The sharp edges of my past softened further, becoming stories I rarely told, lessons absorbed into the bedrock of my character, and grew from a bright toddler into a formidable young woman. She inherited Marcus's boldness and my quiet determination, a combination that made her a force of nature. She had no interest in the traditional paths for women. From a young age she was in her father's office, her small face serious as she listened to business discussions, asking questions that were startlingly perceptive. Marcus, of course, was utterly wrapped around her finger and began teaching her everything he knew, his pride in her evident in every glance. Our business, Thorn Imports, evolved into the Thorn Group. We diversified, investing in local manufacturing, real estate, and even a small modern farm. We were pillars of the community, known not just for our wealth but for our integrity. The name Thorn was synonymous with success built on honesty, a far cry from its earlier, rougher connotations. One evening, and now 17, came to my study. She had been analyzing the accounts for one of our newer ventures. "Mother," she began, her brow furrowed in a way that was so like my own. The profit margins on the textile side are shrinking. The market is becoming saturated. But I've been looking at the new electronics coming from the special zones. There's a demand and our existing shipping channels could be adapted. I listened, a smile playing on my lips. He was right. It was the same instinct Marcus and I had relied on years ago, the ability to see the turning tide. Your father and I have been discussing the same thing, I said. We were thinking of sending a trusted team to Shenzhen next month to scout opportunities. Perhaps you should lead it. Her eyes widened, then shone with a fierce light. Really? You'd trust me with that? We built this for you, and not just to inherit but to shape. Your judgment is sound. It's time. Watching her excitement, I was filled with a profound sense of continuity. The second chance I had been given was now rippling forward, creating opportunities for my daughter that I could never have dreamed of in my first narrow life. Marcus and I grew older together, our love mellowing into a deep, comfortable companionship. The frantic energy of our youth gave way to a quieter strength. We still worked together every day, but our evenings were for us. A quiet walk in our garden, a shared pot of tea, talking about Anne's future, or simply sitting in comfortable silence, our hands linked. One such evening, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, he turned to me. "Do you ever think about him?" he asked quietly. He never said the name, but he didn't need to. I looked out at the peaceful, sprawling view from our veranda, our legacy tangible and real. I thought of the decades of love, the shared struggles and triumphs, the daughter who was our greatest joy. "No," I answered, and it was the complete and utter truth. There was no room for ghosts in a life so full. That was another lifetime ago. It has no place here. He squeezed my hand. Good. The past was a closed book. A lesson learned, a pain endured and overcome. It held no power, no regret, no lingering curiosity. Daniel Hayes was a stranger, a character from a tragic story I had once read, not a man I had ever truly known. The harvest of my second chance was abundant. It was in the respect in people's eyes when they spoke to me. It was in the robust health of my aging father, who passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by love. It was in the dynamic, confident woman my daughter was becoming. And most of all, it was in the man sitting beside me, whose love had been the constant, unwavering sun in my rebuilt world. My first life had been defined by sacrifice for a man who saw me as a tool. My second was defined by a partnership with a man who saw me as his equal. I had been reborn not just into a different time but into a different destiny. I had traded a cane for a cornerstone, and with it I had built a life that could withstand any storm. I looked at Marcus, my partner, my love, my second chance. The sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. "It's been a good life, hasn't it?" I said. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his eyes still so full of love, meeting mine in the twilight. "The best, Elena," he whispered. "The very best. The end."